What turns a father into a killer? August 13th, 2018. A suburban Colorado neighborhood wakes to an ordinary Monday morning. Children wait for school buses. Sprinklers tick across manicured lawns. Garage doors rise and fall. Yet behind one front door, a door that looks just like any other on Saratoga Trail, lies a secret so dark it will shake a nation's understanding of family, betrayal, and the human capacity for deception. "My family is my life," Chris Watts once wrote on Facebook. Within months, those 5 words would become the most haunting lie ever told. This is the story of the Chris Watts family murders, a crime that forces us to question everything we believe about the people closest to us, about the masks we wear, about the thin line between love and annihilation. Stay with me, because what happened in this case could happen anywhere, to anyone, perhaps even next door to you. We often imagine monsters as twisted figures lurking in shadows. We rarely picture them smiling in family photos, holding their children on their shoulders, kissing their wives goodnight. Yet some of the most devastating crimes in human history have been committed not by strangers, but by those bound by blood and vows and the promise of forever. The Watts family appeared perfect on the surface. Their social media chronicled birthday parties and beach vacations, first steps and bedtime stories, the daily miracles of family life, framed and filtered to showcase domestic bliss. Shanann Watts, 34, successful in business and radiant in pregnancy, documented their lives with the passion of someone who believed in the story she was telling. Her daughters, Bella, thoughtful and sweet at 4 years old, and Celeste, mischievous and bold at 3, were the vibrant center of her world. And Chris, her husband of nearly 6 years, played his part as the devoted father and partner, steady and reliable in the background of their shared American dream. But beneath this carefully curated image lay fault lines, financial strain cracking their foundation, marital tension pulling them apart, and a husband whose dissatisfaction had crystallized into something far more dangerous than mere discontent. By the time anyone noticed the warning signs, it would be too late. In the pre-dawn darkness of August 13th, 2018, a white SUV pulled into the driveway of the Watts home in Frederick, Colorado. Inside was Shanann, returning from a business trip to Arizona. Her friend, Nicole Atkinson, watched from the car as Shanann, 15 weeks pregnant with her 3rd child, walked up to her front door, carrying nothing but her suitcase and the promise of a new week with her family. It was 1:48 a.m. Shanann's husband Chris and their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, were supposedly asleep inside. Nicole texted Shanann to make sure she got in safely. Shanann never replied. No one outside that house would ever see Shanann alive again. No one would ever again hear little Bella sing her favorite songs or see Celeste, Cece to those who loved her, dance around the living room in wild abandon. By sunrise, a tragedy had unfolded behind those suburban walls. A crime so unthinkable that it would leave an entire community searching for answers that perhaps no human mind can truly comprehend. The first ripples of concern began around midday. Shanann's phone went straight to voicemail. Her texts remained unanswered. She missed a doctor's appointment, something completely out of character for a woman who managed her schedule with meticulous care. For someone who lived her life in constant connection with others, this silence was deafening. Nicole Atkinson felt it first, that creeping dread that something was terribly wrong. She drove to the Watts home, bringing her son along. They rang the doorbell. They peered through windows. Shanann's car sat in the garage, but the house remained still, silent, keeping its dark secret. When police arrived for a welfare check, they found Chris Watts at home, having left work early at Nicole's insistence. He appeared calm as he welcomed them inside, too calm for a man whose pregnant wife and children had vanished. Shanann's phone lay charging on the counter. Her purse sat untouched. Her essential medication remained in the bathroom cabinet. "Maybe she's at a friend's house," Chris suggested. But even as the words left his mouth, they rang hollow. What mother leaves without her phone, her purse, her medication, without her children? By the next day, As police expanded their search, Chris Watts stood on his front porch before news cameras. He wore a burgundy t-shirt as he spoke about his missing family, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "I just want them back," he said, his voice steady, his eyes dry. "I just want them to come back." He spoke of his daughters in the present tense, then slipped into past tense. He called them "those kids" instead of "my daughters." To those trained in human behavior, his words and actions screamed inconsistency. There was something missing in his pleas, the desperate anguish of a father whose children have vanished, the raw fear of a husband whose pregnant wife is nowhere to be found. Instead, there was calculation, control, a man performing grief rather than experiencing it. Behind the scenes, investigators were already piecing together the fractured reality of the Watts family life. The image Shanann had carefully curated on Facebook of a loving husband, a devoted father, a successful family was coming apart at the seams. While friends organized search parties and family members flew in from North Carolina, detectives discovered text messages revealing a marriage in crisis. They uncovered financial documents showing a family drowning in debt, despite their comfortable suburban facade. And most damning of all, they found evidence of Chris's relationship with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger, a secret that had begun to consume him. In the span of just 24 hours, Chris Watts had transformed from concerned husband to prime suspect. On August 15th, just 2 days after Shanann and the girls were reported missing, investigators asked Chris to take a polygraph test. For nearly 2 hours, he maintained his innocence. But the machine told a different story. When confronted with his deception, Chris's carefully constructed facade began to crack. First came a partial truth. Yes, he was having an affair. Then came a twisted confession. He claimed Shanann had killed their daughters after he asked for a separation, and in a rage, he had strangled her. It was a lie designed to cast himself as a victim of circumstance rather than a calculating killer. But investigators weren't fooled. "If you did this, just tell us where they are," one detective urged. Hours later, Chris Watts led authorities to a windswept oil site owned by his employer, Anadarko Petroleum. There, under the vast Colorado sky, he revealed the full horror of his actions. In a shallow grave lay Shanann, still dressed in the t-shirt and underwear she had worn to bed. And inside 2 crude oil tanks, their small bodies covered in oil, were Bella and Celeste. The search for a missing family had become a recovery mission for murder victims. The mystery had been solved, but the question why still hung in the air, heavier than before. What emerged in the following days and months was a story of methodical violence that defies comprehension. Chris Watts had strangled his pregnant wife in their bedroom as she slept, loading her body into his truck along with his still-living daughters. He drove them to a remote oil site where he had dug a shallow grave for Shanann. Then, one by one, he smothered his daughters. Celeste went first, but Bella, his oldest, had watched her sister die. She asked her father, "Is the same thing going to happen to me?" before he placed a blanket over her face and took her last breath. The medical examiner would later find evidence that Bella had fought for her life. Bite marks on her tongue, bruises on her small body. Her final moments were spent in terror, betrayed by the one person who should have protected her from all harm. Bella's last words to her father, "Daddy, no," would later haunt investigators, prosecutors, and eventually, in his prison cell, Chris Watts himself. Perhaps most chilling was the revelation of Chris's behavior in the hours after the murders. He texted his girlfriend. He called his realtor about selling the house. He researched vacation spots. He made arrangements with the girls' school to unenroll them. Each mundane action, each practical step, illuminated not a man consumed by murderous rage, but one methodically erasing his family to begin a new life, as if they were simply items to be discarded rather than human beings he had once claimed to love. In a courtroom on November 19, 2018, Chris Watts received 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. As the judge delivered his sentence, Shanann's father, Frank Rizuchek, spoke of dreams destroyed and lives forever altered. "We trusted you," he said to his daughter's killer, the heartless monster who took their lives. Shanann's brother, Frankie Razuchek, described the daily torment of imagining his niece's final moments. "It's devastating to know that Bella and Celeste spent their last moments on Earth in fear, confusion, and pain." Chris Watts stood silent, his head bowed, no longer maintaining the pretense of innocence, no longer casting blame on his murdered wife. In prison interviews months later, he would finally admit the full truth, that he alone had planned and carried out the murders of his entire family. When asked why, he could offer no answer that made sense. He spoke of feeling trapped, of wanting a fresh start with his new relationship, of financial pressures, and the impending arrival of a third child. But none of these explanations satisfy. None account for the magnitude of his betrayal. None explain how a father could look into his daughter's pleading eyes and extinguish her life. Today, the house on Saratoga Trail stands empty, a silent monument to lives cut short. In Frederick, Colorado, neighbors still lower their voices when they walk past. The community that once embraced the Watts family now keeps vigil for their memory, struggling to reconcile the horror with the normalcy that preceded it. Shanann's parents, Frank and Sandra Razuchek, have worked to preserve their daughter's legacy and those of their grandchildren. They speak about domestic violence awareness, about the warning signs that, in retrospect, flickered at the edges of their daughter's seemingly perfect life. In the shadow of this tragedy, many have sought answers. Psychologists have analyzed Chris Watts, looking for the telling fracture in his psyche that allowed such violence. True crime enthusiasts have pored over the thousands of texts, social media posts, and police interviews, searching for the moment when everything changed. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of this case is its ordinariness. Before August 13, 2018, the Watts family seemed like any other American family. Their struggles, financial pressure, marital tension, the stress of raising young children were common. Their home could have been on any suburban street in America. This is why the case continues to resonate. It forces us to confront the unsettling truth that sometimes the monster is not hiding under the bed, but sleeping in it. That the line between ordinary discontent and extraordinary violence can be crossed in one unfathomable moment of decision. In the end, this is not a story about Chris Watts. This is a story about Shanann, vibrant, ambitious, loving Shanann, who filled her daughters' lives with joy and structure and purpose. This is a story about Bella, sensitive and thoughtful, who loved school and singing and her little sister. This is a story about Celeste, fearless and funny, who at 3 years old approached life with unbridled enthusiasm. And this is a story about Nico, the unborn son who existed only in possibility. Their lives mattered, their deaths matter. And in telling their story, perhaps we honor their memory by recognizing both the light they brought to this world and the darkness that took them from it. In Frederick, Colorado, and across the country, small memorials have appeared. Butterflies for Celeste, mermaids for Bella, purple ribbons for Shanann. These symbols of remembrance carry forward what was best about them, ensuring that they are remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived and how they loved. For those who knew them, the memories of their laughter echoes louder than the tragedy of their end. And in that remembrance lies a kind of justice that no courtroom can provide, the assurance that while their lives were cut short, their story continues, a reminder of both human vulnerability and resilience in the face of unfathomable loss. As we turn away from this tragedy, one question lingers, demanding our reflection. How well do we truly know those we call family? The answer may be the most important one of all.